千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Laozi. As always, I want to extend my welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we are ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. The Tao has this practical perspective on life. And let me provide this comparison for everyone. In Buddhist tradition, there have been many practices that are focused on living life minimally, which are certainly admirable. In ancient times, there's the original teaching in Buddhism was to renunciate the world, the material world. So renunciation, actually coming from the Sanskrit word naskaramya, it literally meant freedom from sensual lust. And that practice, it was to give up worldly pleasures and whatever else binds us to suffering. In ancient times, there were numerous practitioners who took this very seriously, and therefore they lived life minimally. In ancient China, it was said that one would see through the red dust. The red dust is metaphoric language, meaning the material world. When you decide to become a monk, you see through the red dust of the material world. Because you see through it, you decide to give up on it, and therefore you live a life of austerity. And this was something that many people were not willing to do, and therefore the monks were held with reverence and respect because of their practice in austerity. That's how things used to be. Things have changed in modern times. So today, the Buddhist faith is practiced in many different variations all over the world. And often, renunciation is something that gets reinterpreted. So rather than to give up on all the things that all the pleasures that you partake in the material world, the reinterpretation says you have to give up on the attachment to them. And I hope everyone sees the difference. The idea is that you can still partake in the good things in the world that you enjoy, but you mustn't become attached to those things. Attachment is what brings about the suffering. Now, one thing that is important to realize is that in ancient times, especially in times of chaos and warfare, giving up on the world could be appealing because there's just misery and suffering everywhere. In modern times, with our civilization, with parts of the world being highly developed, you can see human nature would be less willing to give up on all that. Therefore, the reinterpretation. So now that you are aware of that aspect of how renunciation is approached from the Taoist perspective, let's talk about the Tao perspective. Since ancient times, the sages have always maintained that one should engage with the material world because, after all, you and I are living in it. We are in it in order to learn from it. And this is why in the Tao Te Ching, there are passages that talk about mixed with dust. So dust, coincidentally, is the same character as the red dust when we talked about renunciation from the Buddhist perspective. So rather than to see through and give up on all that, the Tao sages would say, we're in it for a reason, and the reason is there is a lesson in the material world. In fact, there are many lessons that we should all learn from. I hope that makes sense. So what about modern times? Does that get reinterpreted? The answer is nope, it is the same. Now, keep in mind that throughout the history of ancient China, there's been great influence from Buddhism into Taoist traditions as well. Therefore, there would be, in ancient times as well as today, Tao practitioners who take on the concept of austerity from Buddhist traditions. But the genuine tradition of the Tao, it is the same idea. We still must mind the basics. Why? Because you and I find ourselves living in the material world, therefore we must deal with it in the best ways possible. This is why Tao cultivators go to work like everyone else. The tradition in the Buddhist path to become a monk has equivalence in the Tao tradition because of the influence, historical influence from ancient times. But when you dig deep into the Tao philosophy itself, it basically is talking about how everyone should be self-sufficient. You should engage with the world as it is. Nothing wrong with indulging in the pleasures of the material world. You just want to watch that indulgence to keep it in moderation, because otherwise you numb your senses. This is the practical angle. This is how the Tao concept and the Tao mindset are different. As we're looking at this, I'm also thinking about the difference between the Western approach and the Eastern approach. It occurs to me that the practical emphasis of the Tao is something that perhaps is better suited for the Western attitude about making sure that you take care of the basics for yourself and your family. At the same time, I also want to recognize that in the Western mindset, there is a dichotomy between being spiritual and being successful. That is, there's still some thoughts about how material success is diametrically opposite to being a spiritual person. Let me then remind everyone that the Eastern approach is a little different. The Eastern approach, consistent with the Tao in ancient times and modern times, is a complete integration of the two. That is, one can be spiritually successful and materially successful at the same time. That there are good ways to become successful in the material world in a way that benefits yourself, your family, loved ones, and everyone you come into contact with. The ultimate win-win scenario. That kind of success isn't a dollar amount that is greater than what other people possess. Rather, it is the contentment and lasting joy that you possess And the more that you gain based on this perspective, the more you can do or contribute to others, to society, to support causes that you believe in. So I want to highlight those differences as a pathway to understanding. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.